The world is not created equal. That was the harsh, immovable truth that Izuku Midoriya learned at the tender age of 4. It was a truth etched into the very fabric of society, a truth demonstrated every time a classmate breathed fire, or levitated a pencil, or stretched their fingers into impossible lengths. It was a truth punctuated by the explosive, blinding light of Katsuki Bakugo's palms. For Izuku, this truth was delivered in a sterile doctor's office, accompanied by an X-ray of a pinky toe with 2 joints. Quirkless. A single word that condemned him to the lowest rung of a superhuman hierarchy. But as Izuku sat in his middle school classroom, staring out the window while the teacher droned on about high school applications, he held on to a desperate, flickering ember of denial. His notebook, Hero Analysis for the Future No. 13, lay open on his desk. Its pages were filled with meticulously drawn sketches, detailed quirk breakdowns, and tactical strategies. It was his anchor, his proof that even if he lacked a power, he did not lack the mind or the heart of a hero. Since you're all third years, it's time to start thinking seriously about your futures, the teacher announced, suddenly tossing a stack of career aptitude forms into the air. But who am I kidding? You're all aiming for the hero course, aren't you? The classroom erupted. Teenagers cheered, showing off minor levitation, rock-hard skin, and elongated limbs. It was a cacophony of minor miracles. Izuku kept his head down, raising a timid hand halfway, hoping not to be noticed. Yes, you all have wonderful quirks, the teacher chuckled. But no using powers in school. Oh, Bakugo. You're going for UA High, aren't you? The cheering died instantly. A collective hush fell over the room. Katsuki Bakugo sat with his feet propped up on his desk, an arrogant smirk plastered across his face. Don't lump me in with these pathetic losers, Bakugo scoffed, his voice dripping with superiority. They'd be lucky to end up as sidekicks to some busted D-lister. I'm the real deal. The class protested indignantly, but Bakugo silenced them with a crackle of miniature explosions dancing across his knuckles. I've aced the mock tests. I'm the only one here with the stuff for UA. I'll surpass All Might and become the top hero. My name will be inscribed on the list of the highest earners. Oh, right, the teacher glanced at his clipboard. Midoriya wants to go to UA too, doesn't he? Izuku froze. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then, the laughter began. It was sharp, cruel, and relentless. Midoriya? No way. You can't get into the hero course just by studying. They got rid of the rule against quirkless applicants, Izuku stammered, standing up, his voice trembling. It could be me. There's no precedent, but... Before he could finish, a tremendous force slammed into his desk, blowing it backward. Izuku was thrown to the floor, coughing from the smoke. Bakugo stood over him, eyes wide with feral intensity, smoke rising from his right palm. Listen up, Deku, Bakugo snarled. You're worse than the rest of these rejects. You're completely quirkless. You really think you can stand in the same ring as me? And no, wait, Kaken. Izuku scrambled backward against the wall. I'm not trying to compete with you. I swear. It's been my dream since I was little. And I won't know unless I try. Try what? Bakugo demanded, stepping closer. The entrance exam is practical. What can a quirkless nobody do? You'll die in the exams. You're a liability, Deku. The rest of the day passed in a blur of humiliation. As the final bell rang and the classroom emptied, Izuku remained in his seat, packing his bags slowly. He reached for his notebook, but a hand snatched it away. Bakugo stood there, his 2 lackeys flanking him. We ain't done talking, Deku. Give it back, Kaken, Izuku said softly, reaching out. Bakugo glanced at the cover. Hero Analysis for the Future. A cruel smile twisted his lips. He pressed his palms together, trapping the notebook between them. A loud crack echoed through the room, followed by the smell of burning paper. Izuku watched in horror as his life's work was scorched, the cover blackened and peeling. Without a word, Bakugo tossed the smoldering book out the open window. Izuku gasped, rushing to the sill, watching it fall into a koi pond 3 stories below. Most top-tier heroes have stories about them from their school days, Bakugo said, walking toward the door. I want the shine of being the only student from this mediocre junior high to make it into UA. so do us all a favor and forget you, nerd. He paused at the door, glancing back over his shoulder. If you really want a quirk that badly, there's a quick way to do it. Pray you'll be born with a quirk in your next life, and take a swan dive off the roof of the building. Izuku froze. His breath hitched in his throat. He turned, anger finally flaring in his chest, fists clenched. But Bakugo just held up a hand, letting a series of sharp, warning pops explode from his palm. Izuku's resolve crumbled. He said nothing. The walk home was a solitary march of self-pity. Izuku fished his ruined notebook out of the koi pond, apologizing to the fish that nibbled at its soggy corners. He walked under a dark overpass, muttering to himself, trying to piece his shattered optimism back together. Idiot, Izuku whispered to himself, wiping his eyes. You can't say that to someone. What if I really did it? You'd be charged with instigating suicide. Stupid Kaken. He took a deep breath, mimicking the booming laughter of the man he idolized above all others. Ha ha ha. I'm fine. Everything is fine. A wet, slurping sound broke the quiet hum of the afternoon traffic. Izuku stopped. The sound came from the manhole cover directly behind him. He turned just in time to see a mass of dark, putrid, greenish-brown sludge erupt from the sewers. The sludge writhed and twisted, forming a vaguely humanoid shape with two massive, unblinking eyes and a gaping, jagged mouth. A medium-sized invisibility cloak, the sludge gurgled, its voice wet and guttural. Izuku backed away, his heart hammering against his ribs. A villain! Before he could turn and run, the sludge lunged. It was impossibly fast. Dark tendrils of foul-smelling liquid wrapped around Izuku's legs, sweeping him off his feet, before enveloping his torso and arms. Don't worry, the villain hissed, the sludge forcing its way over Izuku's chin, creeping toward his mouth and nose. I'm just going to hijack your body. It'll only hurt for a minute. You'll feel much better once you're dead. Panic, pure and primal, seized Izuku's brain. He thrashed violently, his hands desperately clawing at the sludge covering his face. But his fingers slipped right through it. It was like trying to strangle water. I can't breathe. Izuku's lungs burned, begging for oxygen, but every gasp only drew in the vile, sewage-tasting liquid. My body, it's getting heavy. I'm dying. I'm going to die here. Someone, help. His vision began to blur, the edges of the world turning dark. Through the murky green filter of the villain's body, Izuku saw the manhole cover rattle again. A massive figure stepped out of the shadows. Have no fear, you're safe. The voice was thunderous, vibrating in Izuku's chest. It was a voice he had heard a million times through laptop speakers and television screens. Now that I am here, the sludge villain whipped around. All Might? Izuku could barely keep his eyes open. He saw the towering silhouette of the symbol of peace pull back a massive, muscular arm. Texas. Smash! All Might threw a punch. He didn't even make contact with the villain. The sheer, unadulterated wind pressure generated by the swing hit the sludge like a solid wall of concrete. The air detonated in a shockwave, creating a miniature hurricane inside the tunnel. The wind ripped the sludge apart, tearing it off Izuku's body and scattering it across the concrete walls. Izuku collapsed onto the pavement, gasping for air, violently coughing up the remnants of the sludge. He looked up, his vision swimming, to see the towering, golden-haired figure of All Might standing over him. Then, the darkness finally claimed him. Hey! Hey! Wake up! A gentle, rhythmic slapping against his cheek pulled Izuku from the void. His eyes fluttered open. He was met with a shadow that blocked out the sun. As his eyes adjusted, the iconic V-shaped bangs and the blinding smile came into focus. Ah! Good! You're awake! All Might boomed, taking a step back. Sorry about that back there. I didn't mean to get you caught up in my justice doing. Usually I pay more attention, but this city's sewer system is a maze. Izuku scrambled backward, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. He couldn't form words. All Might. The real All Might. He's here. He's standing right in front of me. Well, I've got the villain safely secured. All Might tapped two plastic soda bottles hanging from his pocket, the green sludge swirling angrily inside them. Thanks for your help. Now, I must be off. Wait. Izuku squeaked, finally finding his voice. An autograph. Please. My notebook. He frantically searched the ground, finding the damp, slightly scorched notebook. He opened it, only to find that All Might had already signed it in massive, sprawling English letters across a 2-page spread. He already did it. Izuku bowed so fast and hard he nearly gave himself whiplash. Thank you? I'll treasure it for generations. It'll be a family heirloom. Ha! Well, I'm glad you like it. All Might gave a thumbs up, turning toward the edge of the tunnel. He bent his knees, his massive leg muscles tensing like coiled springs. Now I must bring this fellow to the authorities. You can catch me on the news. Wait! Izuku yelled. Already? But I have so many questions. Pros are constantly fighting time and enemies. All Might declared. He leaped into the air, the shockwave of his jump kicking up dust and debris. As All Might soared over the city, feeling the wind rush past his face, he sighed in relief. He had almost pushed his limit for the day. He just needed to drop the villain off at the station and find a quiet place to rest. Suddenly, he felt an unnatural drag on his right leg. He glanced down, his eyes bugged out of his head. Hanging onto his trousers for dear life, his face flapping uncontrollably in the wind pressure, was the green-haired middle schooler. Hey! What are you doing? All Might shouted, trying to pry the boy off. Let go! Your fanaticism is too much. If I let go now, I'll die! Izuku screamed, his eyes tearing up from the wind. All Might paused. Oh. Right. With a sigh, All Might scanned the area for a safe landing spot, his chest suddenly burning with a familiar, agonizing pain. Damn it! Not here. Not now. He spotted a tall, empty office building and angled his descent, crashing heavily onto the rooftop. Izuku collapsed onto the gravel roof, trembling, his legs feeling like jelly. My life flashed before my eyes. Good grief, All Might groaned, rubbing his neck. If you knock on the door downstairs, someone will let you out. Now I really must go. Wait! Izuku scrambled to his feet, reaching a hand out toward the receding hero. No! I will not wait! All Might barked, his voice straining. He could feel the transformation slipping. Smoke began to curl from his skin. But I have to know! Izuku shouted, the words tearing themselves from his throat. He clenched his eyes shut, pouring years of rejection, bullying, and desperate hope into one final, agonizing question. Even if I don't have a quirk, can I become a hero? Can even someone without a quirk be like you? All Might froze. The smoke around him thickened, billowing in thick, white clouds. Izuku kept his eyes shut, oblivious to the change happening before him, letting his heart bleed out. Because I don't have a quirk, I've always been picked on. That's why, maybe that's why, I think saving people is the coolest thing someone can do. I want to save people with a fearless smile. I want to be the greatest hero, just like you. Izuku opened his eyes, ready to receive the symbol of peace's wisdom. Instead, standing where the towering, muscular god had been, was a skeletal, emaciated man in baggy clothes. His eyes were sunken, dark shadows clinging to his sharp cheekbones. He looked sickly, frail, and entirely ordinary. Izuku screamed. Who are you? What happened to All Might? Are you an imposter? The skeletal man sighed, sitting heavily against the rooftop railing. He wiped a trail of blood from his mouth. I assure you, I am All Might. You know how guys at the pool suck in their gut to look buff? I'm like that. Izuku's worldview shattered. No way. It can't be. A fearless smile, huh? All Might muttered, his voice quiet, stripped of all its usual bombast. He pulled up his oversized t-shirt, revealing a horrific, jagged scar that covered the entire left side of his torso. The skin was puckered and twisted, a violent crater of missing flesh. Izuku gasped, taking a step back. 5 years ago, All Might said, staring at the scar. An enemy did this to me. My respiratory system was nearly destroyed, and my stomach was completely removed. I've endured repeated surgeries, but the after-effects are severe. Right now, I can only do hero work for about 3 hours a day. 5 years ago? Izuku's mind raced. Was it toxic chainsaw? You know your stuff, All Might chuckled softly, though it ended in a cough. But no. That punk couldn't bring me down. This fight was kept under wraps. I asked that it not be made public. A symbol of peace who saves people with a smile must never be daunted by evil. I smile, to hide the pressure and the fear I feel inside. All Might let his shirt drop, looking up at the boy. His sunken blue eyes were painfully sad, but resolute. Pros are always risking their lives, All Might said, his tone uncompromisingly serious. Some villains simply cannot be beaten without power. Can you be a hero without a quirk? I have to say no. The word hit Izuku like a physical blow. It was heavier than Bakugo's explosions. It was the final nail in the coffin of his lifelong dream, hammered in by the very man he worshipped. Oh, Izuku breathed, his voice barely a whisper. I see. If you want to help people, All Might continued softly, pulling himself to his feet. You could become a police officer. They get mocked because villains are delivered to their doorstep, but it's an honorable profession. It's not bad to dream, young man. But you have to make sure those dreams are realistic. With that, All Might turned and walked down the rooftop stairwell, leaving Izuku utterly alone against the backdrop of the sprawling, superpowered city. Izuku didn't know how long he stood there. The sky began to bruise with the colors of late afternoon. He mechanically walked down the stairs, out of the building, and into the streets. His feet carried him aimlessly. The notebook in his hand felt like a lead weight. Even All Might said it. Izuku thought, his eyes empty, staring at the pavement. It's over. I have to face reality. A loud explosion jolted him from his stupor. Boom! Boom! Izuku blinked, looking up. Smoke was billowing into the sky just a few blocks away. The acrid smell of burning buildings and the panicked screams of a crowd drifted through the air. Out of sheer, ingrained habit, Izuku's legs began to move toward the danger. I should go write down notes, he thought, before catching himself. No. There's no point anymore. Despite his despair, he found himself standing at the back of a massive crowd gathering at the entrance of a shopping district alleyway. Fire raged through the storefronts. The heat was oppressive. Pro-heroes were establishing a perimeter, holding the crowd back. It's a villain! Someone in the crowd shouted. He's got a hostage! Izuku pushed his way to the front, looking past the yellow police tape. His breath caught in his throat. Thrashing wildly in the center of the alley was the sludge villain. No. Izuku's eyes widened in horror. How? All Might had him. He remembered clinging to All Might's leg. The sudden jerk, the wind. The bottles. They must have fallen out of his pocket when I grabbed him. The realization slammed into Izuku with the force of a freight train. This is my fault. Why aren't the heroes doing anything? A civilian yelled. They can't. Another answered. The villain grabbed a middle schooler. The kid has a strong quirk and is firing off explosions randomly. The heroes can't get close. Izuku looked closer. Through the thick, swirling mass of green sludge, he saw a familiar tuft of ash-blonde hair. He saw sparks igniting in the sludge, useless against the liquid mass. It was Kaken. Kamui Woods tried to reach him, but the fires kept him at bay. Death Arms, a hero with incredible physical strength, tried to punch the villain, but his fist sank uselessly into the slime. Mount Lady couldn't fit down the narrow street. They were waiting. Waiting for someone with a suitable quirk. Waiting for a miracle. Izuku watched in paralyzed terror. He's suffocating. Just like I was. The pain, the sheer panic. And it's all my fault. I'm sorry, Kaken. I'm so sorry. Through the swirling smoke and the monstrous, mocking laughter of the villain, Bakugo's face turned toward the crowd. His red eyes locked onto Izuku. They weren't filled with his usual arrogance or rage. They were filled with pure, unadulterated fear. It was a silent, desperate plea for help. Before Izuku's brain could process what was happening, his body acted. He vaulted over the police tape and sprinted headlong into the inferno. Hey! Kid, stop! Death Arms roared, reaching out but missing. You'll get yourself killed! Izuku didn't hear him. The roar of the flames, the shouts of the heroes, the terrifying gurgle of the villain, it all faded into a deafening silence. What am I doing? His mind screamed at him. Why am I running? The villain looked down, his massive eyes narrowing. You again? The brat who got away. Izuku didn't have a plan. He didn't have a weapon. He didn't have a quirk. But as he closed the distance, he remembered page 25 of his ruined notebook. If an enemy is liquid, aim for the solid points. With a desperate cry, Izuku unslung his bright yellow backpack and hurled it with all his might. The heavy bag spun through the air, the brass zipper striking the villain squarely in its right eye. Gah! The villain shrieked, the sludge loosening its grip for just a fraction of a second. Bakugo gasped, dragging oxygen into his lungs. Deku? What the hell are you doing here? Izuku fell to his knees, his hands clawing uselessly at the sludge surrounding Bakugo. I don't know. My legs just started moving. Tears streamed down Izuku's soot-stained face. He looked at Bakugo, offering a wobbly, terrified smile. You looked like you needed saving. Get off me, you quirkless brat! The villain roared, recovering from the strike. The sludge reared back in a massive wave, preparing to smash Izuku into the pavement. I'll kill you both. I'm going to die, Izuku thought, squeezing his eyes shut. But at least I tried. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. It wasn't an explosion. It felt like the rhythmic stomping of a titan. Hey! Villain! A voice boomed through the alleyway. It wasn't All Might. This voice was deeper, rougher, carrying a thick, rolling accent that commanded immediate, absolute attention. Izuku opened his eyes. Standing atop a burned-out car just at the edge of the police tape was a man of impossible proportions. He wasn't wearing a sleek hero costume. He wore tight red wrestling trunks, a thick leather belt, and red wrestling boots. His torso was a mountain range of striated muscle, marred by countless thick, jagged scars. He had a fierce mohawk and a thick, dark beard. The pro-heroes stared in shock. Wait, Kamui Woods gasped. Is that you hide in liquid? The man bellowed, pointing a finger as thick as a baseball bat at the sludge villain. You take hostage a small boy. You have no honor. You have no strength. You have no muscle spirit. Who the hell are you? The villain hissed, raising a tendril. Die! The giant man leaped. He didn't just jump. He launched himself into the air like a human cannonball, sailing over the heads of the pro-heroes. He descended right into the center of the alley, landing between Izuku and the sludge villain. The impact of his boots shattered the concrete, creating a small crater. I am the Red Cyclone! The man roared. Zangief! Before the villain could bring his sludge hammer down, Zangief spread his massive arms out to his sides, clenching his fists. He planted his feet wide and began to spin. It didn't make sense. Physics seemed to break down entirely. Zangief spun so fast that his muscular arms became a continuous, red blur. Double lariat! The sheer, raw aerodynamic force of Zangief's spinning arms created an immediate, localized tornado. The air pressure in the alley skyrocketed. The flames of the surrounding buildings were snuffed out instantly by the violent vacuum. Izuku grabbed onto a nearby lamppost to keep from being blown away. He watched in absolute awe. The spinning winds slammed into the sludge villain. Liquid cannot hold its shape against a hurricane. The villain shrieked as his viscous body was caught in the gale. The wind pressure acted like invisible blades, tearing the sludge apart piece by piece, atomizing it against the brick walls of the alley. Bakugo was thrown free, tumbling across the pavement. Zangief stopped spinning abruptly, stomping one foot down to halt his momentum. He reached out and caught Bakugo by the collar of his uniform before the boy could hit a wall, setting him down gently. The sludge rained down around them in tiny, harmless splatters. The villain was entirely incapacitated, scattered into thousands of puddles, groaning weakly from the ground. Silence fell over the alley, save for the crackle of dying embers. Zangief stood tall, crossing his massive arms over his scarred chest, nodding in satisfaction. He turned to look down at Izuku. The giant Russian's face broke into a warm, hearty grin. Good throw with the bag, little man. Zangief boomed. Izuku just stared, his jaw practically touching the floor. He recognized the man now. Zangief wasn't a standard pro-hero. He was a legendary underground wrestling champion from Russia who occasionally engaged in hero work, famous for subduing villains with pure, unadulterated grappling techniques. What he just did, creating a tornado with his biceps, was supposed to be a video game myth, not reality. The silence broke as the pro-heroes rushed in. Death Arms immediately started scooping up the sludge into containment bags, while Kamui Woods checked on Bakugo. What were you thinking? Death Arms rounded on Izuku, furious. You have no quirk. You were completely suicidal. You got in our way and almost got yourself killed. If you hadn't interfered, we could have handled it, Kamui Woods chided, though he looked somewhat ashamed. Izuku bowed his head, tears of frustration and shame welling up again. I'm sorry. I know. I'm sorry. Hold on, let me get a look at him. The heroes were pushed aside. Kamui Woods was shoved by what looked like an energetic blur of blue and white. A young woman bounded up to Izuku. She wore a striking, revealing wrestling outfit, a blue leotard with a heart-shaped cutout, a white domino mask over her eyes, and massive blonde pigtails that bounced with every step. Mika! One of the crowd members shouted. The Rainbow Bomber. Mika practically invaded Izuku's personal space, leaning down to look him in the eyes. Whoa! You really ran in there with zero powers? Against a giant booger monster? Izuku stuttered, his face turning a bright shade of crimson at her proximity. Enough! Zangief's voice silenced the scolding heroes. He stepped forward, placing a massive, calloused hand on Izuku's shoulder. The weight of it almost brought Izuku to his knees, but it was incredibly warm. You heroes, Zangief looked at Death Arms and Kamui Woods, his tone laced with disappointment. You waited. You calculated. You watched boys suffocate because conditions were not perfect. This is not the way of a true champion. He's a civilian. Death Arms argued. He was reckless. He was brave. Zangief countered, his voice echoing off the buildings. He turned his attention back to Izuku. Tell me, boy. Why did you run? What was your plan? Izuku looked down at his ruined red shoes. I didn't have one. I saw my classmate. He looked like he was asking for help. My legs just moved on their own. Zangief's eyes widened slightly. He looked at Mika, who grinned widely and gave a firm nod. Zangief threw his head back and unleashed a laugh that rattled the windows. Ha ha ha! Magnificent! Zangief slapped Izuku on the back, sending the boy stumbling forward. Your legs moved before your brain could give in to fear. This is the highest truth of combat. It is the instinct of a warrior. Huh! Izuku blinked, rubbing his back. They tell you that you are weak because you lack a quirk, Zangief said, kneeling down so he was eye level with Izuku. Up close, the scars on Zangief's chest were even more intimidating, but his eyes were remarkably kind. They rely on fire, on wood, on lasers. They forget the foundation. They forget the iron will of the human spirit. They forget the muscle. Zangief flexed a bicep that was wider than Izuku's torso. When a quirk fails, Zangief continued, his voice dropping to an intense, passionate rumble. When the fire goes out, when the mind is broken, what is left? The body. The sweat. The training. The unbreakable will to lift your opponent and smash them into the earth. He's talking about wrestling. Mika cheered, striking a pose. The ultimate form of heroics. You young man, Zangief pointed at Izuku's chest, right over his heart. You have something a quirk cannot give you. You threw your bag to create an opening. You faced death for your comrade. You possess what I call muscle spirit. Izuku's breath hitched. For 10 years, everyone had told him no. His mother had cried and apologized. His classmates had mocked him. His childhood friend had told him to jump off a roof. Even the symbol of peace had told him to give up. But here, amidst the rubble and the ashes, a giant from across the world was looking at him with absolute respect. Can I? Izuku choked on a sob, his vision blurring with tears. Can I really be a hero? Even without a quirk? A hero? Zangief scoffed, standing up to his full, terrifying height. Bah! We will aim higher. We will make you a champion of the people. Mika slung an arm around Izuku's neck, giving him a noogie that nearly snapped his neck. Yeah. Master Zangief is in Japan for a whole year for a cultural exchange. We saw you, kid! We saw that fire. What's your name? Izuku. Midoriya, he wheezed, tapping Mika's arm to relieve the chokehold. Midoriya! Zangief bellowed, striking a classic double bicep pose, the muscles in his back popping like boulders. If you are willing to sweat, if you are willing to bleed, if you are willing to embrace the iron path, I will forge your body into a weapon. I will teach you the way of the grappler. I will teach you to suplex the very concept of evil. Izuku looked at Zangief. He looked at Mika. He looked past them, to where Bakugo was glaring at him, pride wounded but undeniably alive. All Might had told him to be realistic. Maybe becoming a hero who punched away the weather with shockwaves was impossible. But maybe there was another way. A path carved with calluses, sweat, and unbreakable holds. Izuku wiped his eyes, his trembling hands curling into fists. He looked up at the red cyclone, a new, fiery determination replacing the despair in his eyes. Yes, Izuku said, his voice steadying. Please. Teach me. Zangief grinned, revealing a row of surprisingly white teeth. Excellent. Tomorrow at dawn, we meet at the beach. We begin with 1,000 squats. Bring water, Midoriya Izuku. You will need it to replace your tears. And just like that, the quirkless boy who had lost everything found his destiny, not in the genetics of a quirk, but in the squared circle of muscle spirit. The alarm clock did not buzz. It merely clicked before a heavily calloused hand slammed down on it, silencing the device at 4 a.m. sharp. Izuku Midoriya rolled out of bed, the floorboards creaking under a weight they hadn't been accustomed to just a few weeks prior. The room was still pitched in the ink-black darkness of early dawn. He didn't reach for his phone to check hero news. He didn't glance at the All Might posters that lined his walls. Instead, he dropped to the floor and immediately began a set of 200 rapid-fire push-ups, his breath hissing through his teeth in a controlled, rhythmic cadence. 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 months. That was the timeline. 10 months until the UA high school entrance exams. Izuku stood, his joints popping, and threw on a gray tracksuit. He crept quietly out of his apartment, careful not to wake his mother, Inko. She had been worried sick when he first came home covered in soot and smelling of sewage, but that worry had morphed into utter bewilderment when he told her he was being trained by an international underground wrestling champion. The air outside was biting, carrying the salty, iodine tang of the ocean. Izuku jogged the 2 miles to his destination, his lungs burning pleasantly. His destination was Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. Or, as the locals called it, the Dagoba City Dump. For years, ocean currents and illegal dumping had transformed the once pristine coastline into a towering, labyrinthine mountain range of rusted appliances, rotting tires, and jagged scrap metal. It was a monument to societal neglect. As Izuku arrived at the concrete seawall overlooking the beach, the ground beneath his sneakers actually vibrated. Clang! Screech! Crash! Izuku peered over the edge. Down on the sand, illuminated by a pair of heavy-duty portable floodlights, were his 2 mentors. Zangief, standing 7 feet tall and weighing close to 400 pounds of pure, striated muscle, was currently engaged in a wrestling match with a rusted-out, 2-ton pickup truck. The massive Russian wore nothing but his signature red wrestling trunks, seemingly impervious to the biting sea wind. RRRRGH. You are heavy, yes. But you lack technique. Zangief roared at the inanimate vehicle. He stepped in, wrapping his tree trunk arms under the truck's front bumper. The veins in his neck bulged like steel cables. And up! With a terrifying groan of bending metal, Zangief deadlifted the front of the truck off the sand. But he didn't stop there. He pivoted his hips, dropping his center of gravity, and executed a flawless, earth-shaking belly-to-belly suplex, flipping the entire truck over his own head. It slammed upside down into a pile of washing machines, sending rust and sand exploding into the air. Perfect form, Master Zangief! Cheered a voice from above. Izuku looked up to see Mika standing perfectly balanced on top of a teetering stack of refrigerators. She was wearing her blue and white leotard, a white jacket thrown over her shoulders to stave off the chill. She threw her arms up, playing to an invisible crowd. The crowd goes wild. The red cyclone shows no mercy to the forces of tetanus. Zangief dusted his hands off, letting out a booming laugh that echoed over the crashing waves. He turned and spotted Izuku at the top of the stairs. "Ah! Young Midoriya! You are precisely on time!" Zangief bellowed, waving a massive hand. "Come down! The iron waits for no man." Izuku scrambled down the concrete steps, dropping his duffel bag onto the sand. "Morning, kid!" Mika backflipped off the refrigerators, falling 30 feet and landing on the sand with the graceful crouch of a gymnast. She bounded over, slapping Izuku on the back hard enough to make him stumble. "Ready for day 20 of hell?" "I'm ready," Izuku said, his eyes filled with a fierce, burning determination. The past 3 weeks had already been the most agonizing, grueling experience of Izuku's life. When Zangief had promised to train him, Izuku assumed they would go to a gym. He assumed there would be treadmills and dumbbells. He was wrong. A gym builds show muscles, Zangief had explained on their first day. A gym has air conditioning. A gym has soft mats. Villains do not fight you on soft mats. Villains fight you on concrete, in the mud, in the fire. To build true muscle spirit, we must forge you in the elements. Zangief pointed a massive, scarred finger at the towering mountains of trash stretching across the coastline. "This is your gymnasium. By the time 10 months have passed, this beach will be pristine, and you will be a weapon. So, today we're moving more trash?" Izuku asked, eyeing a pile of rusted microwave ovens. "Moving?" Zangief scoffed. "Any man with a strong back can move trash. You are not a mover. You are a grappler. You will not carry the trash, Midoriya. You will throw it." Zangief walked over to a rusted, waterlogged washing machine. It had to weigh at least 200 pounds. "Observe. The washing machine is your opponent. It is stubborn. It is grounded. If you try to punch it, you break your hand," Zangief demonstrated by lightly tapping the metal casing. "But the grappler does not care how hard the opponent is. The grappler uses leverage." Zangief stepped in, wrapping his arms around the machine's midsection, his legs spread in a wide, immovable base. "You drop your hips beneath their center of gravity. You pop the hips, arch the back, and, with a sudden, violent burst of speed, Zangief lifted the washing machine and launched it over his shoulder. A perfect German suplex. The machine flew through the air and crashed onto a designated scrap pile 50 feet away. "Your turn," Zangief said, stepping back. Izuku swallowed hard. He walked up to the next washing machine in the pile. He squared his stance, mimicking Zangief's footwork. He dropped his hips, pressing his chest against the cold, rusted metal. He wrapped his arms around the base, linking his fingers together. "Remember, Izuku?" Mika called out from the sidelines. "It's not just in the arms. The arms only hold. The power comes from the legs and the core. Explode upward." Izuku closed his eyes. He thought of Bakugo's mocking laughter. He thought of the sludge villain's suffocating grip. He thought of All Might telling him to be realistic. "I will not be realistic. I will be impossible," Izuku screamed. He channeled every ounce of strength in his scrawny frame into his thighs. He popped his hips upward. The washing machine groaned. It left the sand by a few inches, but Izuku's form broke under the immense weight. His grip slipped, and the machine crashed back down, dragging Izuku into the dirt with it. He lay panting in the sand. Again. Zangief's voice boomed, completely devoid of pity. "Do not let the machine win the mental battle, Midoriya. Stand up." Izuku scrambled to his feet. He reset his stance. He grabbed the machine. He pulled. It didn't budge. He pulled again. For 4 hours, as the sun slowly rose and painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, Izuku wrestled with household appliances. His hands blistered and bled. His back screamed in agony. His lungs burned. But every time he fell, Zangief was there, not with a hand to help him up, but with a booming command to rise. Finally, at 8 a.m., Izuku managed to lift a smaller mini-fridge over his head, his arms trembling violently, and slammed it backward into the sand. "Yes!" Mika cheered, blowing a loud referee's whistle. "That's a 3 count. Ding ding ding!" Izuku collapsed on his back, staring up at the clouds, his chest heaving. He couldn't feel his arms. Zangief's massive shadow blotted out the sun. The Russian crossed his arms, looking down at his student with an approving nod. A decent start. But strength and leverage are only one half of the grappler's equation. Strength means nothing if your body shatters like glass when the enemy strikes. Zangief reached down and hoisted Izuku to his feet by the collar of his tracksuit. Take your shirt off, boy. Izuku blinked, confused, but complied, pulling the sweaty gray fabric over his head. His torso was thin, his ribs visible, though a faint layer of newly earned muscle was beginning to define his shoulders. A quirk user relies on their power as a shield, Zangief lectured, pacing back and forth in the sand. The fire user keeps you at bay with heat. The telekinetic pushes you away. But the grappler? The grappler must enter the enemy's domain. We must walk through the fire, through the fists, to grab them. This means you must possess a body of iron. You must learn to take the hit, absorb the kinetic energy, and smile. Zangief stopped pacing. He stood directly in front of Izuku. Square your stance. Flex your abdominal muscles. Tighten your neck. Izuku did as he was told, bracing himself. Oh, okay. I'm ready. Zangief pulled back his massive right hand. The palm was as wide as a dinner plate. No, you are not, Zangief said softly. Whack. The sound echoed off the rusted metal mountains like a gunshot. Zangief's open palm chops struck Izuku square in the center of his chest. Izuku didn't even have time to process the pain. The sheer kinetic force lifted him entirely off his feet. He flew backward through the air, sailing a good 10 feet before crashing violently into the soft sand. He lay there, paralyzed. It felt as though a cannonball had passed clean through his sternum. He couldn't breathe. His lungs were in full spasm. A massive, angry red handprint was already glowing on his pale chest. Izuku! Mika winced, taking a half step forward, but Zangief held up a hand to stop her. He must learn, Zangief said firmly. He walked over to where Izuku was wheezing, gasping like a fish out of water. When you are struck, your instinct is to exhale completely and fold inward. This is a mistake. You must trap the air in your lungs, tightening the muscles to create a natural armor. You must meet the force with your own force. Izuku rolled onto his side, coughing violently, finally drawing a ragged breath. Tears streamed from the corners of his eyes from the sheer shock of the pain. If this was a villain, you would be dead, Zangief said, his voice cold and serious. Stand up, Midoriya. Izuku's arms shook as he pushed himself out of the sand. His chest throbbed with a sickening, radiating heat. He stood on shaky legs, his eyes locked onto Zangief's. Again, Zangief commanded. Izuku gritted his teeth. He widened his stance. He dug his toes into the sand. He took a deep breath, pushing his diaphragm out, clenching every muscle in his core until he trembled. He stared directly into Zangief's eyes, refusing to blink. Zangief's hand lashed out again. Whack! This time, Izuku didn't fly back 10 feet. He slid backward, his feet carving twin trenches in the sand. He fell to one knee, coughing up spit, but he didn't collapse. A slow, massive grin spread across Zangief's bearded face. Better. Your muscle spirit awakens. Again, month 3. The pain never stopped, but Izuku's relationship with it changed. It was no longer a terror to be avoided. It was a metric of his progress. His body was changing at an alarming rate. Zangief had placed him on a strict, terrifying diet. Gone was his mother's katsudon. It was replaced by massive cauldrons of Russian borscht, heavily fortified with protein powders, entire roasted chickens, and dozens of raw eggs. Izuku was eating 10,000 calories a day. His metabolism, fueled by the agonizing beach workouts, incinerated the fat and forged dense, thick muscle. At school, the changes were becoming impossible to ignore. Izuku sat at his desk, his uniform jacket feeling uncomfortably tight across his shoulders. The collar of his shirt was straining against his thickening neck. Katsuki Bakugo leaned back in his chair, glaring at Izuku from the corner of his eye. Bakugo had noticed the change. Deku wasn't hunching over his desk anymore. His spine was straight. He didn't flinch when Bakugo slammed his hands on the desk. He didn't stutter as much. Hey, Deku, Bakugo sneered, popping a small explosion in his palm. You think you're hot shit suddenly just because you hit a growth spurt? You're still a quirkless nobody. Yue is going to chew you up and spit you out. A few months ago, Izuku would have cowered, apologizing profusely. Now, Izuku simply looked up from his notebook. He didn't look angry or scared. He just looked analytical. He looked at Bakugo's shoulders, at his center of gravity. Kaken's stance is wide to brace for his explosions, Izuku thought. But it makes him top-heavy. If I duck under the right hook, his hips are completely exposed for a double-leg takedown. Did you hear me, nerd? Bakugo snapped, slamming a hand down on Izuku's desk, singeing the wood. Izuku calmly placed his hand over Bakugo's wrist. He didn't squeeze hard, but his grip was like a steel vice. Bakugo's eyes widened slightly in shock. He tried to pull his arm back, but for a split second, it wouldn't budge. I heard you, Kaken, Izuku said softly, his voice noticeably deeper, resonating from his chest rather than his throat. I have to get back to my notes. Izuku released the wrist. Bakugo snatched his arm back, rubbing it instinctively, a flash of genuine confusion crossing his features before it was replaced by pure rage. He opened his mouth to scream, but the teacher walked in, forcing Bakugo to return to his seat, fuming. Izuku looked down at his notebook. It was a brand new one. The cover didn't say Hero Analysis for the Future. It read, Grapple Promo Tactics Volume 1. Inside were detailed anatomical sketches of pro-heroes and villains, identifying their centers of gravity, their joint vulnerabilities, and their psychological weak points. Month 6. The beach was halfway clear. Entire mountains of trash had been moved, not by machinery, but by the sheer, unadulterated supplexing power of a teenage boy. It was mid-afternoon. Zangief was resting, meditating atop a pile of crushed cars. It was Mika's turn to teach. Mika had set up a makeshift wrestling ring out of old mattresses and industrial ropes tied between 4 rusted lampposts. She stood in the center, a megaphone in her hand. All right, Izuku! Mika yelled, her voice easily overpowering the crashing waves. Master Zangief is teaching you how to destroy the body. I am here to teach you how to capture the soul. Being a hero isn't just about beating the bad guy. It's about saving the people. And how do you save people who are paralyzed by fear? By defeating the villain quickly? Izuku asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. He was wearing his red wrestling boots and a tight green tank top. His arms were corded with thick veins, and his chest was broad and solid. Wrong. Mika buzzed her lips loudly. You save them by giving them a show. You save them by projecting absolute, undeniable confidence. You make the villain look like a joke, and you make the civilians believe that victory is inevitable. We call it popping the crowd. Mika tossed the battered microphone attached to a broken boombox to Izuku. This is your weapon. Just as important as your fists, Mika instructed. A quirk user can blind people with flashy lights. You are a grappler. You must blind them with your charisma. I want you to cut a promo on that refrigerator over there. Pretend it's a villain holding hostages. Izuku looked at the rusted, algae-covered refrigerator. He squeezed the microphone. He cleared his throat. Excuse me, villain, Izuku stammered, reverting slightly to his old, nervous habits. Please let those people go. Or else I will have to use force. Mika groaned, face palming so hard it echoed. Izuku, no! You sound like a telemarketer asking for a survey. Where is the fire? Where is the muscle spirit? You are not asking for permission to be a hero. You are declaring yourself the undisputed champion of justice. Mika hopped out of the ring, marching over to him. Listen to me. The mind controls the body. If you speak like a mouse, you will fight like a mouse. You need to speak from your diaphragm. You need to use your eyes. You need to make that refrigerator believe that in 5 seconds, it is going to be reduced to scrap metal. Now try again. Izuku took a deep breath. He thought about the essence of All Might. All Might didn't just fight, he announced his presence. I am here. It was a declaration of safety. Izuku closed his eyes. He dug deep, finding that well of agonizing physical pain he had endured for the past 6 months, the fire of his daily 1,000 squats, the sting of Zangief's chops. He channeled all of it into his chest. He opened his eyes, glaring at the refrigerator with a sudden, intense ferocity. He raised the microphone. Listen to me, You rusted heap of scrap. Izuku's voice boomed over the beach, startling a flock of seagulls into the air. It wasn't the squeaky voice of a middle schooler, it was a commanding, theatrical roar. You think you can terrorize these people? You think your cold exterior can withstand the heat of justice? Look at these muscles. Izuku struck a double bicep pose, the microphone held near his mouth. These muscles were forged in the fires of Dagoba. I am the Emerald Cyclone, and I am not here to arrest you. I am here to take you to Suplex City. Watch me fly. Izuku dropped the mic, broke into a dead sprint, leaped into the air, and delivered a devastating, two-footed dropkick straight into the center of the refrigerator. The heavy appliance was launched backward, tumbling end over end across the sand. Izuku landed perfectly on his feet, popping back up and throwing his arms out to an imaginary roaring crowd. Mika was jumping up and down, tears streaming down her face. Yes. That's it. 5 stars. The crowd is losing their minds. You're over, kid. You're totally over. From atop the crushed cars, Zangief opened one eye, a proud, rumbling chuckle vibrating in his chest. Duh. The boy is ready to learn the real techniques. Month 9. Toshinori Yagi walked slowly along the seawall, his oversized coat pulled tight against the crisp autumn wind. He coughed into a handkerchief, wincing at the spots of blood. His time was running out faster than he had anticipated. Every time he transformed into All Might, the pain in his side grew worse, the duration of his power shrinking. He had been spending his afternoons scouring the city, looking for a successor. Night Eye had recommended the boy from UA with the premiation quirk, Mirio Togata. Mirio was an excellent candidate. Perfect even. But Toshinori's mind kept drifting back to a few months ago. To a rooftop. To a quirkless boy with desperate, pleading eyes. Can even someone without a quirk be like you? Toshinori had crushed the boy's dream. He had told him to be a police officer. It was the pragmatic, safe answer. But later that same day, he had watched that same quirkless boy charge into a raging inferno to save a classmate, while he and every other pro-hero stood by, paralyzed by circumstance. The boy had moved when no one else would. He had the heart of a true hero, but a heart without the vessel to contain one for all was useless. If Toshinori gave the power to a scrawny, untrained kid, the sheer kinetic blowback of the quirk would blow the boy's limbs off. The boy simply didn't have the physical foundation. It was a tragic paradox. Toshinori sighed, stopping to lean against the railing overlooking Dagoba Beach. He remembered the beach being a dumping ground, an eyesore. He looked down, expecting to see mountains of trash. Instead, he saw a pristine stretch of golden sand, sparkling under the afternoon sun. What in the world? Toshinori muttered, rubbing his sunken eyes. The beach was completely cleared. The junk was gone. Suddenly, the ground beneath him shuddered. A massive shadow moved near the water's edge. Toshinori squinted. He saw 3 figures. 2 adults and a teenager. The teenager was shirtless, wearing green trunks, glistening with sweat. Toshinori squinted harder. He recognized the unruly shock of green hair. It was the boy from the sludge incident. Young Midoriya. But he was different. The scrawny, trembling kid was gone. In his place stood a young man carved from marble. Midoriya's shoulders were broad and heavily muscled. His chest was thick, his abdominals defined like a grid of iron. His neck was thick, supporting his head with a predator's posture. His back. Midoriya turned slightly, flexing his lats. Toshinori gasped. The boy's back muscles were so dense and hypertrophied that when he flexed, the striations and knots of muscle seemed to form the terrifying visage of a demon's face. It was a physique built not just for aesthetics, but for supreme, explosive, utilitarian power. How? Toshinori thought, utterly bewildered. How did he achieve this in less than a year? Down on the beach, Zangief was holding up a massive, rusted engine block he had saved for last. It must have weighed 1,000 pounds. This is the final test of your foundation, Midoriya. Zangief roared. A villain stands before you. His quirk makes him heavy as lead and hard as diamond. Your strikes will bounce off. What do you do? I don't strike. Midoriya roared back, his voice deep and echoing. I throw. Midoriya charged the engine block. He didn't slow down. He ducked his head, wrapping his thick, scarred arms around the greasy, jagged metal. He drove his legs into the sand, digging his heels deep until they struck the wet, compacted earth beneath. Reaya! Midoriya's muscles bulged, the veins popping along his biceps and forehead. Slowly, agonizingly, the 1,000-pound engine block lifted off the ground. Midoriya hoisted it up, resting it against his chest. He took 3 steps forward, his knees trembling, but his core locked tight. Then, he dropped his hips and arched backward in a terrifying display of explosive strength. A bridging back suplex. The engine block flew over Midoriya's head and slammed into the sand with the force of a meteor strike. A crater formed, sending wet sand blasting outward in a 50-foot radius. Midoriya remained in the bridging position on the sand, his back arched, his neck supporting his body weight, his arms still locked as if holding a pinned opponent. 1, 2, 3. Mika slapped the sand 3 times, jumping to her feet. Match. Midoriya collapsed out of the bridge, rolling onto his back, panting heavily, a triumphant smile spreading across his face. Zangief walked over, pulling the boy to his feet and pulling him into a bone-crushing bear hug. Up on the seawall, Toshinori Yagi gripped the railing so hard the metal groaned. His sunken blue eyes were wide with disbelief and awe. He didn't just see a strong boy. He saw a vessel. A perfect, unyielding, indestructible vessel. He cleared the entire beach, Toshinori realized, his heart hammering in his hollow chest. He didn't use a machine. He suplexed the beach away. Toshinori knew what he had to do. He had found his successor. The boy had the spirit of a savior, and now, he had forged the body of a god. The final day, the morning of the exam, the sun peeked over the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the immaculate, sparkling sands of Dagoba Beach. Izuku stood at the edge of the water, letting the cold waves wash over his boots. He closed his eyes, listening to the ocean. He felt ready. His body was a coiled spring. His mind was sharp. He knew the mechanics of leverage, the physics of momentum, and the psychology of the crowd. "You have done well, my student," Zangief said softly, standing beside him. The massive Russian looked at the clean beach, a rare look of profound emotion in his eyes. "You came to me a lump of iron ore. Today you are Damascus steel. I couldn't have done it without you, Master Zangief." "And you, Mika," Izuku turned, bowing deeply to both of them. Mika wiped a tear from her eye, sniffling loudly. "Don't get all sappy on me, kid. You've got an exam to crush today. You're gonna go in there, cut a killer promo, and pile-drive every robot they throw at you." "Indeed," Zangief nodded. "But before you go, young Midoriya," the 3 of them turned. Walking down the concrete steps was a tall, skeletal blond man in an oversized yellow suit. Izuku's eyes widened. "Why, Yagi-san?" "The man from the rooftop." "All Might?" Zangief narrowed his eyes, stepping in front of Izuku defensively. "Who is this toothpick? He knows your secret identity?" It's complicated, Master," Izuku said, stepping around Zangief. He looked at Toshinori. "What are you doing here? Did you come to tell me I'm being unrealistic again?" There was no malice in Izuku's voice, only a calm, confident challenge. Toshinori flinched. He walked up to Izuku and stopped. Without a word, the former number 1 hero bowed down, bending at a perfect 90-degree angle. Izuku gasped. All Might! "What are you doing?" "I am apologizing," Toshinori said, his voice echoing with genuine regret. 10 months ago, I told you that you could not be a hero without a quirk. I allowed my own cynicism and my injury to blind me to the truth. I saw what you did for the Bakugo boy. And I have been secretly watching you for the past 3 months. Toshinori stood up straight, looking Izuku up and down, admiring the sheer physical mass the boy had accumulated. "You proved me wrong, young man. You have the heart of a hero, and through sheer, agonizing effort you have built the body of one. You are worthy." Izuku's breath hitched. The words he had waited his entire life to hear. "You can be a hero." "I did not just come to apologize," Toshinori continued, stepping closer. "I came to make you an offer. I have a quirk that can be passed down from person to person. It is called One for All. I want you to be my successor, Izuku Midoriya. I want to give you my power. Izuku froze. The wind seemed to stop. A quirk, that can be passed down. But why me? You said yourself, my body. Your body before would have exploded from the kinetic energy, Toshinori explained. But look at you now. You have forged a vessel capable of withstanding incredible shock. You are ready to inherit the power. Zangief stepped forward, his massive frame towering over Toshinori. The Russian crossed his arms, staring down at the skeletal hero. You are all might, Zangief rumbled. The symbol of peace. I respect your strength. But you offer my student a shortcut. You offer him a magic trick. We do not need your magic. My student has muscle spirit. Toshinori met Zangief's gaze without flinching. It is not a shortcut, Zangief-san. It is a torch. A torch passed down through generations to defeat an ultimate evil. Midoriya's muscle spirit is exactly why he is the only one who can carry it without being corrupted by it. Zangief stared at Toshinori for a long, tense moment. He looked at the frail man, sensing the fading embers of a warrior's soul within him. Suddenly, Zangief smiled. He reached out and grabbed Toshinori in a crushing, suffocating bear hug, lifting the skeletal man off his feet. GK. Toshinori wheezed, his eyes bulging. I see the fire in your sunken eyes, skeleton. Zangief laughed, setting Toshinori back down and patting his shoulder hard enough to rattle his teeth. You have the heart of a true champion. Midoriya, the choice is yours. A grappler does not reject a tool if it helps him suplex heavier objects. Izuku looked at his calloused hands. He had trained to be a hero without a quirk. But if All Might was offering him the power to save more people, to be a true symbol. I'll do it, Izuku said firmly, looking Toshinori in the eyes. I accept. Toshinori smiled, a radiant, genuine smile. Excellent. Now, there is no time to waste. The exam begins in a few hours. Toshinori reached up and plucked a single, golden strand of hair from his bangs. He held it out between his thumb and forefinger, the morning sun catching it like a golden wire. Now, Toshinori said dramatically. Eat this. Silence descended upon the beach. A seagull cawed in the distance. Izuku blinked. Excuse me? To inherit the power, you must consume some of my DNA, Toshinori explained matter-of-factly. Swallow it. Mika burst out laughing, falling onto the sand and clutching her stomach. Oh my God! That is the most uncapable thing I've ever seen. You're making the kid eat a hair? Zangief scratched his beard, looking unimpressed. In Russia, we drink the blood of bears to gain their strength. Hair is less sanitary, but acceptable. Eat the hair, boy, Izuku grimaced. He took the hair from Toshinori, closed his eyes, popped it into his mouth, and swallowed hard. He choked briefly, pounding his thick chest to get it down. He stood there for a moment, waiting. He looked at his hands. He flexed his arms. I don't feel anything, Izuku said, confused. It takes time for the body to process it, Toshinori said, checking his watch. Perhaps a few hours. The power will manifest when you truly need it. But a warning, young Midoriya, one for all is incredibly volatile. If you channel too much of it into a punch, you could shatter your own arm. You must regulate the output, Izuku frowned. Shatter my arm? Zangief scoffed, placing a heavy hand on Izuku's shoulder. Bah! This is why quirk users are foolish. They put all their power into the smallest, most fragile joints of the body. The fist is made of tiny bones, Izuku. It is meant for holding, not for breaking iron. Zangief knelt, looking Izuku directly in the eyes. If this magic power courses through you, do not put it in your fist. Put it in your legs. Put it in your core. Put it in your back. A punch breaks the hand, master, Izuku recited the lesson, a fierce grin spreading across his face. Zangief nodded, his eyes shining with pride. A suplex breaks the earth. Now go! Show this school the terror of the Red Cyclone's disciple. Izuku grabbed his duffel bag, throwing it over his massive shoulder. He bowed one last time to his mentors and to his idol. As Izuku jogged away from the beach, heading toward the train station that would take him to UA High School, he felt a strange, burning sensation deep in his stomach. It wasn't the pain of the physical training. It was a buzzing, electric heat, radiating outward from his core. He didn't know how to throw a superpowered punch. He didn't care. Izuku Midoriya, the Emerald Cyclone, was going to the UA entrance exam, and he was going to suplex every single robot in his path. The train ride to Muzidifu was a surreal experience for Izuku Midoriya. For the first time in his life, he wasn't trying to shrink himself to avoid the gaze of others. In fact, shrinking was physically impossible. The standard issue junior high uniform he had worn on his first day of middle school had long since been retired, replaced by a custom-tailored gray UA entrance exam tracksuit that still somehow felt a size too small. Every time the train swayed, Izuku casually adjusted his stance, his thick, trunk-like legs absorbing the kinetic shift with flawless balance. The fabric of his tracksuit stretched tight across his broad shoulders and barreled chest. Passengers subtly glanced at him, their eyes widening at the sheer, undeniable mass of the teenager gripping the overhead handle. He looked less like a prospective high school student and more like a heavy-duty construction quirk specialist. Izuku stared at his reflection in the train window. His jawline had squared out, his neck was as thick as a tree stump, and his green eyes held a calm, analytical fire. He took a deep breath, expanding his massive ribcage, and exhaled slowly. Today is the day, he thought, feeling that strange, dormant electricity buzzing deep in his stomach. One for all. I haven't figured out how to use it yet, but Master Zangief said I don't need magic to suplex my enemies. The power will come when the crowd demands it. The train doors hissed open. Izuku stepped out, merging with the sea of prospective students flowing toward the towering, H-shaped gates of UA High School. Out of my way, Deku. Izuku stopped. He didn't flinch. He slowly turned his head to see Katsuki Bakugo walking up behind him, hands shoved deep into his pockets, his red eyes glaring daggers. Good morning, Kaken, Izuku said, his voice deep and rumbling from his chest. He didn't stammer. He didn't look at the ground. He looked directly into Bakugo's eyes. Bakugo stopped. A flicker of genuine hesitation crossed his face, a subconscious reaction to the sheer physical wall of meat and muscle standing before him. For the last few months, Bakugo had tried to ignore Izuku's transformation, writing it off as some late-blooming, useless mutation. But standing here, at the gates of their shared dream, the reality was unavoidable. Deku was massive. Don't stand in front of me, Bakugo snarled, forcing his signature scowl back onto his face. I'll kill you. The ring is big enough for all competitors, Kaken, Izuku replied evenly, stepping slightly to the side with a graceful, balanced pivot. I look forward to our matches. Bakugo's jaw twitched. He wanted to yell, to pop an explosion in Izuku's face, but the absolute lack of fear in Deku's eyes unnerved him. With a frustrated TCH, Bakugo stormed past him, marching toward the auditorium. Izuku watched him go, a small, confident smile playing on his lips. He's favoring his right side today. His balance is slightly off. If we grapple, I take his left leg. Shaking his head to clear his tactical thoughts, Izuku took his first step onto the UA campus, and immediately tripped over his own massive boots. Still a bit clumsy outside the ring, Izuku realized as the concrete rushed up to meet his face. He prepared to tuck his chin and roll into a break fall, a basic maneuver Zangief had drilled into him thousands of times. But before he could execute the roll, he felt a sudden weightlessness. The sensation of gravity vanished entirely. He hovered awkwardly in midair, inches from the pavement, his thick limbs flailing slightly. Are you okay? Izuku turned his head. Standing next to him was a girl with short, bobbed brown hair and large, warm brown eyes. She had her hands pressed together, her fingertips glowing with a faint pink light. It's my quirk. Sorry for using it without asking, she said, a cheerful, breathless quality to her voice. She touched her fingertips together, and released the technique. Release. Gravity reasserted itself. With lightning-fast reflexes honed by catching falling appliances, Izuku planted his massive hands on the concrete, absorbing his heavy frame, and pushed off, flipping backward to land perfectly on his feet. The concrete cracked slightly beneath his boots. The girl's eyes widened to the size of saucers. Whoa! You're super agile for someone so, big. Izuku stood up to his full height, instantly remembering Mika's lessons on crowd interaction. Eye contact. Project confidence. Be the baby face the crowd wants to cheer for. Thank you, citizen. Izuku boomed, flashing a wide, bright smile, puffing his chest out. I merely stumbled. But your zero-gravity technique is an excellent save. You have the reflexes of a true champion. The girl blinked, slightly taken aback by his theatrical delivery, but a massive blush spread across her cheeks. Oh. Thank you. I'm Ochiko Uraraka. I'm super nervous, but let's do our best, okay? I am Izuku Midoriya. Izuku struck a quick, respectful pose, extending a massive, calloused hand. Let us bring the heat of justice to this exam, Uraraka-san. Uraraka shook his hand, her small fingers entirely engulfed by his massive paw. She giggled, her nervousness evaporating. You're funny, Midoriya-kun. Good luck. As she jogged away, Izuku pumped his fist. Nailed the promo. The babyface connection is established. The orientation auditorium was vast, plunging into darkness before a single, piercing spotlight illuminated the center stage. Welcome to my live show, everybody. The voice of Present Mike, the voice hero, shattered the silence. He struck a dramatic pose behind his DJ booth. Say hey, silence. The thousands of anxious teenagers in the crowd offered absolutely nothing. Izuku frowned in his seat. What an unresponsive crowd. They are killing his momentum. A good performer needs a pop to feed off of. I said say hey. Present Mike tried again, leaning over the podium. From the middle of the auditorium, a single, booming, baritone voice erupted, vibrating the seats around it. Hey! The crowd is ready, microphone warrior. Bring on the challenge. Every head in the auditorium snapped toward Izuku. Present Mike blinked beneath his orange shades, a massive grin spreading across his face. He pointed a finger gun directly at Izuku. Yeah! I like your energy, listener. You get it! Present Mike shouted, invigorated. Now, let's get down to the rules of this practical exam. Present Mike went on to explain the setup, a massive mock city, populated by 3 types of robotic villains worth 1, 2, and 3 points. The goal was to rack up points by destroying them within a 10-minute time limit. As Present Mike explained the rules, Izuku furiously scribbled in his notebook. He wasn't writing down the point values, he was drawing the silhouettes of the robots shown on the screen, calculating their centers of gravity, their joint vulnerabilities, and their potential weight distribution. Suddenly, a tall, severe-looking student with glasses and slicked-back blue hair stood up, his hand raised as rigid as a board. A spotlight immediately hit him. Excuse me, may I ask a question? The student demanded loudly. Hit me. Present Mike said. On the printout, there are clearly 4 types of villains. If this is a misprint, then UA, the most prominent school in Japan, should be ashamed of that foolish mistake. The boy then turned around, his finger pointing directly at Izuku. And you, with the curly hair, Izuku looked up from his notebook. You've been muttering and shouting since this presentation began. The glasses-wearing student scolded. This is not a professional wrestling event. If you cannot take UA seriously, you should leave immediately. The crowd murmured in agreement. Bakugo, sitting a few rows down, smirked. Izuku didn't flinch. He didn't shrink into his seat. Instead, he stood up. At his full height, his massive frame blocked the light for the row behind him. He looked down at the boy with glasses, channeling every ounce of Mika's promo training. Izuku took a deep breath, expanding his chest, and projected his voice from his diaphragm. I apologize if my enthusiasm disrupts your focus, competitor. Izuku's voice rolled over the auditorium like thunder, completely unmiked but easily heard by everyone. But I assure you, I take this challenge with the utmost seriousness. I am merely visualizing the mechanical anatomy of my opponents. To defeat the enemy, one must first understand how they balance. Izuku struck a pose, pointing his pencil at the screen. And a true hero does not sit in silence when the announcer calls for a response. We must bring the energy. The bespectacled boy was momentarily stunned by the sheer volume and confidence radiating from the green-haired giant. He adjusted his glasses, slightly flustered. Ahem. I see your point. A hero must project confidence. I withdraw my complaint. All right, settle down, listeners. President Mike laughed, delighted by the exchange. To answer your question, examinee 7111. The fourth villain type is worth 0 points. It's an obstacle, a massive gimmick. If you see it, don't fight it. Just run away. Now, get out there and go beyond. Plus Ultra. Test Center be the starting gates. The mock city was staggering in its scale. Towering skyscrapers, paved roads, and intricate alleyways formed a perfect urban battlefield behind a massive set of steel gates. Hundreds of examinees were stretching, warming up their quirks, and nervously chattering. Izuku stood near the back of the pack, doing deep lunges. His leg muscles bulged against the fabric of his tracksuit. The boy with glasses from the auditorium, Tenya Ada, was lecturing someone near the front, while Uraraka was taking deep, calming breaths near a streetlight. Izuku felt the adrenaline spiking in his blood. It was time. He couldn't fight in this restrictive tracksuit. It limited his range of motion. With a swift, fluid motion, Izuku grabbed the zipper of his tracksuit jacket and ripped it down, shrugging off the heavy gray fabric. He then untied the drawstring of his pants, pulling them off over his boots, revealing his chosen combat attire. The crowd of examinees went dead silent. Izuku Midoriya stood before them wearing a skin-tight, electric green wrestling singlet. It left his massive, scarred arms, shoulders, and legs completely bare. He wore thick red knee pads and bright red wrestling boots. Around his waist was a thick, black leather lifting belt. He looked like an absolute maniac. He looked like a superhero. What the hell is he wearing? Someone whispered loudly. Is this a joke? Is he a joke character? Another muttered. Look at his arms. Those are real scars. Izuku ignored them. He rolled his neck, the joints popping loudly, and slapped his massive pectorals twice, hyping himself up. Let's get ready to rumble. Right, let's start. President Mick's voice blared over the loudspeakers. Get moving! There are no countdowns in real battles. Run, run, run! The crowd hesitated for a fraction of a second, processing the sudden start. Izuku did not hesitate. His legs, forged by tens of thousands of squats on the shifting sands of Dagoba Beach, exploded with kinetic force. Boom! The concrete beneath Izuku's red boots cracked as he launched himself forward, blowing past the stunned examinees in a blur of green and red. He cleared the gate before anyone else had even taken their first step. Holy crap! He's fast! Someone yelled. Izuku sprinted down the main avenue of the mock city. His eyes darted left and right, scanning for targets. The mechanical whirring of gears alerted him to a side alley. A one-pointer rolled out from the shadows. It was a bulky, green, mono-wheeled robot with 2 machine gun-like appendages. Its red optical sensor locked onto Izuku. Target acquired. Target identified. Izuku roared back. He didn't slow his sprint. As the one-pointer leveled its weapons, Izuku channeled a minuscule fraction of the buzzing energy in his stomach, one for all. He only let a tiny spark, maybe 5%, flow into his legs. Red energy briefly crackled around his calves. Izuku leaped. He didn't just jump, he soared. He launched himself 15 feet into the air, perfectly parallel to the ground. He extended both legs, his heavy red boots aimed squarely at the robot's central sensor. Smash! Izuku's dropkick connected with the force of a wrecking ball. The one-pointer's metal chassis crumpled inward like an aluminum can. The sheer kinetic transfer ripped the robot off its wheel, sending it flying backward into a brick wall where it exploded in a shower of sparks and metal debris. Izuku landed perfectly on his feet, popping back up instantly. 1 point. Behind him, the rest of the examinees finally flooded into the street, just in time to see the explosion. He destroyed it with 1 kick? Don't let him take all the points. Go! Izuku was already moving. He darted down a parallel street, his senses heightened. 2 two-pointers emerged from a crosswalk, resembling robotic scorpions with heavy, pinching claws. One of them lunged at Izuku, its claws snapping shut where his head had been a millisecond before. Izuku slipped under the strike, stepping deep into the robot's guard. Leverage. Center of gravity. Izuku wrapped his massive arms around the robot's primary chassis segment. He locked his hands together, a gable grip. He planted his boots, dropped his hips, and let out a guttural roar. German suplex. With terrifying speed, Izuku lifted the ton-of-steel robot off the ground and bridged backward. The robot's heavy optical head was driven directly into the pavement with a sickening crunch. The metal snapped, the internal hydraulics ruptured, and the machine went completely dead. Izuku didn't even pause to watch it die. As he held the bridge position, the second two-pointer charged him from behind. Izuku rolled sideways out of the bridge, popping to his feet as the robot's claws sparked against the pavement where he had just been. Izuku charged the robot head-on. As the machine raised its arm to strike, Izuku ducked, threw his thick right arm out horizontally, and clotheslined the robot's neck joint. Lariat! The sheer force of Izuku's momentum, combined with the dense muscle of his arm, sheared the robot's head entirely off its chassis. That's 5 points. Izuku yelled to the empty street, striking a quick double bicep pose for the hidden cameras before sprinting toward the next sound of combat. The judge's room. High above the mock city, in a dark, multi-screen observation deck, the faculty of UA High School watched the carnage unfold. We have quite a crop this year, noted Midnight, the R-rated hero, sipping from a mug. That explosion boy in Center A is racking up points with terrifying efficiency. And what about Center B? Asked Snipe, pointing a gloved finger at a large central monitor. What in the tarnation is that kid doing? Every eye in the room turned to the monitor. On the screen, Izuku Midoriya was standing on top of a 3-story building. Below him, 3 three-pointers had cornered a group of examinees. Izuku stepped onto the ledge. He didn't look scared. He looked ecstatic. He let a flicker of one for all, that same 5%, flow through his body. He leaped off the building, spreading his arms and legs wide as he plummeted toward the earth. Flying body splash. Izuku's voice roared through the monitor's audio feed. He landed flat on his chest and stomach across the top of all 3 robots simultaneously. The sheer kinetic impact of a 200-pound wall of muscle falling from 30 feet, amplified by one for all, flattened the robots instantly, sending shockwaves of dust rolling down the street. Izuku immediately popped up, uninjured, flexing for the security camera. By God! President Mike screamed, leaping out of his chair in the judge's room, abandoning all professionalism. He broke them in half. He has a family. Mike, sit down, grumbled Shota Aizawa, Eraserhead, his eyes glued to the screen. But look at him, Shota. He's not using a blaster quirk. He's just suplexing them. Mike argued, gesturing wildly. Aizawa narrowed his tired eyes, watching as Izuku grabbed a 1-pointer by its wheel and began spinning it around like a hammer throw, using it to smash into a 2-pointer. It's not just brute force, Aizawa analyzed, his tone completely serious. Look at his footwork. Look at how he controls his center of gravity. He never strikes with his fists. He knows human bones will shatter against that armor. He uses leverage, momentum, and wrestling mechanics. He's weaponized pure physics. And that energy radiating from him on occasion, noted Nedzu, the principal, his beady animal eyes sparkling with interest. It resembles All Might's raw power, but he's barely tapping into it, using it only to enhance his mobility and leaps. He's relying entirely on his physical foundation. Fascinating. He's at 45 points, Midnight purred. A very impressive showing. But, Nedzu reached out a paw, hovering over a large, glowing red button on his console. Yes. It's time to see how they react to true despair. Let's see if our little gladiator has the spirit of a hero. Nedzu pressed the button. Test center be the climax. Izuku was panting, sweat dripping from his chin, staining the green fabric of his singlet. He had just executed a flawless power bomb on a 3-pointer, bringing his score to 54. He felt incredible. The pain of the beach, the 1,000 squats, the raw egg diets, it had all culminated in this. He was unstoppable. 6 minutes remaining. President Mick's voice echoed. Suddenly, the ground beneath Izuku's boots violently shuddered. It wasn't the rhythmic stomp of Zangief's lariat. This was a seismic event. The buildings at the far end of the street exploded outward. A massive, towering wall of olive green metal eclipsed the sun. It was the zero-pointer. A robotic behemoth the size of a skyscraper. Its treads crushed entire buildings as if they were made of cardboard. Its red optical sensor bathed the street in a terrifying, apocalyptic glow. Targets detected. The robot's voice was a booming, mechanical nightmare. It raised a fist the size of a house and slammed it into the street, sending a shockwave that blew examinees off their feet. Panic erupted. It's the zero-pointer. Run! We can't fight that thing. Are they trying to kill us? The examinees broke and ran, stampeding in the opposite direction. Izuku stood his ground for a moment, analyzing the beast. Master Zangief said to never back down from a challenge. But that thing is too big. Even with perfect leverage, I can't lift a skyscraper. There's no point value. Running is the tactically correct move. Izuku turned to join the retreat. Ow! The sound was faint, barely audible over the grinding gears of the behemoth, but Izuku's ears caught it. He stopped and looked back. 30 yards away, amidst the rubble of a crushed building, Achiko Uraraka was on the ground. A massive slab of concrete had pinned her leg. She was struggling, her face contorted in pain, desperately trying to use her quirk to lift the debris, but she was exhausted. The zero-pointer's treads were slowly rolling toward her. In less than 10 seconds she would be crushed. Izuku's mind went blank. The tactical analysis, the point scores, the fear, it all evaporated. Your legs moved before your brain could give in to fear. This is the highest truth of combat. Zangief's booming voice echoed in his soul. Izuku turned around. He planted his right boot on the cracked pavement. He didn't run away. He didn't call for help. He glared at the mechanical titan, took a deep breath, and let the buzzing energy in his stomach explode. One for all, 100%. The power surged through Izuku's vascular system like liquid fire. Red veins of energy illuminated his skin, glowing brightly beneath the green singlet. The sheer pressure of the quirk tearing through his muscles was agonizing, but the iron-forged fibers of his body held together, refusing to tear. Don't put it in the fist. Zangief had warned him. The fist breaks. Put it in the legs. Put it in the core. Izuku channeled the entirety of All Might's legacy into his thick, tree-trunk thighs. He dropped his hips, coiling his body tighter than a spring. The concrete beneath him spider-webbed, instantly turning to dust under the immense pressure. Hiya! Izuku leaped. The resulting shockwave shattered the windows of every remaining building on the block. The sonic boom deafened the fleeing students, who turned around in shock to see a green comet rocketing straight up into the sky. Izuku shot upward, clearing the dust cloud, ascending past the zero-pointer's chest, past its massive shoulders, until he was completely parallel with its giant, mechanical head. He was hundreds of feet in the air. The wind roared in his ears. Down in the judge's room, All Might, in his skeletal form, was gripping the back of President Mika's chair, his eyes wide, his jaw slacked. He's doing it! He's using the power! Smash it, Midoriya! Smash it! But Izuku didn't pull his arm back for a punch. Instead, at the apex of his jump, Izuku flipped forward. He spread his arms wide and slammed chest first into the zero-pointer's optical faceplate. What is he doing? Snipe yelled at the monitors. Izuku wrapped his thick, scarred arms around the top and bottom of the robot's massive metallic head. His hands, acting as giant meat hooks, dug into the seams of the armor. Leverage. Izuku brought his knees up, clamping his thick legs around the robot's neck joint. He was essentially hugging the robot's face. Now the core. The back. Izuku channeled the 100% OFA power from his legs into his abdominal and back muscles. He violently twisted his hips, wrenching his upper body with the force of a localized hurricane. The zero-pointer's neck gears shrieked. With a deafening snap that echoed across the entire Mach City, the robotic titan's head was wrenched from its shoulders. But Izuku wasn't done. He was still in the air, holding a robot head the size of a minivan, completely infused with the power of the #1 hero. I am the Emerald Cyclone! Izuku roared, his voice piercing the heavens. He kicked off the headless neck of the zero-pointer, launching himself backward into the sky, taking the massive head with him. In midair, Izuku adjusted his grip, flipping the robot head upside down so that its top pointed toward the earth. He tucked his own head, locking his legs around the machinery, and began to spin. He became a drill of green, red, and metal, descending from the sky at terminal velocity, spinning. Izuku roared, the wind tearing at his face. The fleeing examinees stopped, staring up in absolute, unadulterated terror and awe as the human drill plummeted toward the earth. Pile driver! Izuku drove the zero-pointer's own head directly into its massive, exposed chest cavity. The impact was beyond cataclysmic. When the metal head, driven by Izuku's suplexing momentum and 100% of one for all, struck the main chassis, the robot's internal reactor detonated. The sheer kinetic force of the piledriver, combined with the explosion, drove the entire skyscraper-sized robot straight down, crushing its treads and burying its lower half entirely into the bedrock of the mock city. A massive shockwave of dust and air pressure blasted outward, knocking every student on their back. The sound was like a bomb going off inside a tin can. Then, there was silence, save for the rain of metal debris. The zero-pointer was completely annihilated, reduced to a smoking crater of scrap metal. High above, in the judge's room, not a single hero breathed. Aizawa dropped his pen. Ned's jaw was slightly open. All Might was shaking, tears of sheer pride welling in his sunken eyes. President Mike grabbed his microphone, his hands trembling. He killed it. He suplexed the zero-pointer. By God mighty, he broke it in half. Down in the rubble, the dust began to clear. Izuku was lying on top of the crushed chassis. He looked at his arms. They were bruised a deep, nasty purple, and they throbbed with a sickening pain, but they weren't shattered into a million pieces like All Might had warned. His legs, however, felt like they were made of jelly, and he was pretty sure he had broken a few ribs from the impact. I regulated the output into my core and legs, Izuku thought hazily, a tired smile spreading across his face. The muscle armor held. Master Zangief was right. Izuku slowly rolled over, wincing at the pain in his ribs. He looked down and saw Uraraka staring up at him, the debris that had pinned her having been blown away by the shockwave of his attack. She looked at him as if he were a god that had just descended from the heavens. Are you okay? Izuku rasped, managing a weak thumbs up. Time's up. President Mick's voice finally called out, signaling the end of the exam. Izuku let his head fall back against the metal. He closed his eyes. He had left everything in the ring. He had popped the crowd. He had saved the girl. Muscle. Spirit. Izuku whispered, before finally passing out. Epilogue to the exam. Well, dear, I must say, your boy is quite the specimen. Izuku woke up in the nurse's office, smelling the distinct scent of sterile alcohol. Recovery Girl, the youthful heroine, was standing by his bed, tapping her cane. His bones didn't shatter, she muttered to herself, looking at an X-ray on her tablet. Severe micro-tearing in the muscle fibers, 3 fractured ribs, and intense fatigue. But the sheer density of his musculature acted as a shock absorber for the quirk's blowback. Unprecedented. Izuku sat up slowly, wincing. He was wearing his school uniform again. Did I pass? That's not for me to say, Sonny, Recovery Girl chuckled, handing him a cup of water. But I've been working at UA for a long time, and I've never seen anyone pile drive a zero-pointer. Now drink up, and go home. Your body needs rest. The walk home was a blur. Izuku's muscles screamed with every step, but his heart felt light. He had done it. He had used the power. A week passed in agonizing suspense. Izuku returned to his training at the beach with Zangief and Mika, though they focused purely on stretching, promo cutting, and recovery, forbidding him from lifting heavy objects until his ribs healed. Zangief had watched the footage of the exam, somehow obtained through underground hero channels, and had wept manly tears of joy, declaring Izuku's spinning piledriver to be a symphony of violence. Then, the letter arrived. Izuku sat at his desk, staring at the holographic projection of All Might. The symbol of peace was wearing a yellow suit, looking slightly awkward in front of the camera. Young Midoriya! All Might boomed. You did excellently on the written exam. But the practical, well, I have never seen such a terrifying display of grappling in all my years. All Might showed the scoreboard. Izuku had scored 54 villain points. It was a solid score, easily passing. But wait! All Might pointed to the screen. A video played, showing Uraraka entering the judge's room after the exam, pleading with present Mike to give Izuku some of her points because he had saved her. Izuku felt a lump form in his throat. A hero course that rejects those who do the right thing is no hero course at all. All Might declared. This is a job that requires risking one's life to put their words into action. Rescue points. The scoreboard updated. Izuku Midoriya, 54 villain points. 60 rescue points. Total, 114 points. First place. All Might beamed, pointing directly at the camera. Come, young Midoriya. This is your hero academia. Izuku didn't cry. He didn't bawl like he used to. He stood up from his desk. He walked over to his mirror. He looked at the thick scars on his arms, the broadness of his chest, the fierce, determined fire in his eyes. He raised both arms, clenching his fists in a classic double bicep pose, staring down his reflection. The Emerald Cyclone was going to UA High School. And the hero world would never be the same.